Hi, welcome to another video from Corona Fine Art. Today I wanted to do part 2 of painting a sunset with watercolor paints. I'm going to go ahead and finish this watercolor painting and just tell you a little bit about my process and some other techniques that I use for this painting. I hope that you enjoyed the previous video. It was, my first longer video because I wanted to do more of a full lesson showing some techniques and showing more details of my process painting my Puerto Rico series I'm working on. So right now I'm layering some more watercolor over the sunset that I worked on in the previous video. Layering some orange over the purples, just to bring a little more depth on here. And if you notice, I'm putting a lot more pigment on the paper than previously because I really want to go ahead and push the contrast on here now. Before, in the previous video, I was working on laying the foundation for the colors, so I put a little bit more water with the pigment, but this time I'm still putting a little water but more pigment to make it darker and brighter, so intensifying the value of the color and the chroma as well. So I'm very excited to announce that I was recipient of a grant, the Wild Dog Initiative, and I'm using this grant to take a workshop this upcoming summer 2020. I'll be taking a workshop on watercolors, actually, painting watercolors, night scenes. So this painting, as I told you in my previous video, I haven't done a lot of sunsets or night scenes with watercolors. So this painting is going to be, one of the first that I'm going to do with, that kind of darkness to them and low values. So I'm very excited to take my skills to the next level with the workshop I'm taking this year. And I'll also be doing a lot larger paintings with watercolors as well. And by the end of that workshop and maybe another month, I'll probably have a body of work that I would like to have an exhibit with. So that's all coming up this year in 2020, so I have a lot to look forward to with my art. I started, being an acrylic painter, an acrylic paint painter. So most of my work is done with acrylic paints. But last year I started doing more watercolors, and this whole year I've been doing a lot of landscapes with watercolors and some figures as well, but not as many as landscapes. So I really want to, get better with this medium and learn more techniques and how to create different effects. And this is why I decided to take that workshop. So going back to this painting, I am layering some darker shades in the clouds again, to push that contrast. Most of this video, it's going to be, really pushing the contrast and making the painting a lot darker than it is now at this point, because again, it's a sunset. So when you have a scene when the sun is going down, a lot of the surroundings are starting to get really dark, so they're using a lot of light touching the surfaces of the water or the rocks in the foreground. And some of these clouds, are also in shadow. As you can see here, some of the clouds that are in front of the sunset are a little darker. Because of that blocked light. So here I am just going over the hills in the background and darkening those a little more. Because, the sun is actually behind them, so they're going to be really, really dark. Still leaving some of those blank spaces to show the splatter of the water up in the foreground. So I'm using the same color palette as my previous video, just adding less water to leave the colors a little darker. Coming in with some blue here just to add more lines to create a sense of movement in the water, the waves coming from the deep ocean and moving towards the shore. So I'm alternating the thickness of the brush strokes. So all of this is going wet on dry because I did allow some time for the first layer of paint to dry completely in order to go on top with this dry layer, or with this wet layer, I'm sorry. Because the going wet on dry really allows you a little more control over where the pigment goes to create more detailed lines. And here I've expanded the bristles on the brush a little bit kind of mess with them so they're not, completely together, just to create a little more different texture in the water. So here I'm working still in the water, just adding more contrast. So it's really, layer after layer after layer of color. I like building up the darkness slowly so I can add more depth and more details as well. And have a little more control. Also working on the splash of water here in the very front, on the right, just building that contrast as well, because I do want it to be darker. Since the sunset is behind it. If you ever taken a photo that has been against the light, or where the sunset or the sun is behind you, it always comes out dark because the light is blocked by the object in front of it. So this is the case here in the scene where the sunset is in the background and the splash of water here blocks the sunlight, so the front of it is going to be much darker than it looks now. So here I'm adding some darker splashes coming out against the sunset, because when I was there, the water really went up high and even blended in with the sky. Sometimes the splashes of water blended with the clouds. Something so cool to see. Just you could see a wave coming in the distance, and you knew that was going to be a really big splash. And sometimes you thought it was and it wasn't, which was really fun to see. Sometimes I had to wait a very long time for the water to splash up, but it was so interesting to watch hitting the rocks and going up. so high, those huge splatters. And freeze it with a photograph, or take a slow motion video of it. It's really cool too, to notice that movement. So I'm just working, adding more details and more contrast to the foreground, to this huge rock. Had a really sharp texture to it, so I want to make sure that my brush strokes are not smooth, but instead that they create like this rough, an even surface quality, but at the same time dark quality, because this rock was, the color of it was really dark already, and with a low light it became even darker. So I just started to add some more lines in the water. To show some movement, darkening some areas. In a minute here, I'm gonna bring you guys a little closer to the painting, and I'm going to do a quick time lapse just to show you the ending, just how to finish it. I'm very close to finishing up, so just working on the mountain a little more, adding a little more definition here. If you remember from a previous video, I said that you could still see some of the vegetation up on that hill, so some palm trees. So I want to give that suggestion of palm trees. But in this quick ending time lapse, I'm just adding more intensity to the color, as you can see here. So just adding more pigment, more defining lines on the ocean. Thank you so much for watching. I hope that you visit my website, coronafineart.com, and don't forget to subscribe and leave me a comment. Thank you for visiting.